Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to another short war video. And it feels like every day we wake up these days, something massive is happening between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States, and today is no exception whatsoever. We have heard this morning that Russia has intentionally targeted and destroyed a major American electronics plant in Ukraine just a day after a Russian drone exploded in Poland. We've also seen reports that the US officials have begun withdrawing from peace talks with Russia amid new demands from the Putin regime. Meanwhile, the US president has issued a statement suggesting that Ukraine must attack Russia in order to be able to win the war in a very cryptic social media post. Also in Crimea, Ukraine has unleashed hell on the Russian occupiers as they've struck yet another fuel train, a railway station, the Black Sea Fleet, and an airfield all in one go. And also as a bonus, Ukraine's released footage showing the production of the new Flamingo missile, and spoiler alert, it's got the Russians absolutely panicking. So we got very big news today, and let's jump into our first post, which goes to Yaroslav Trofimov. And this right here is our biggest news of the day. Right now we're hearing the main target of Russia's overnight attack was one of the biggest American investments in Ukraine, which was an electronics plant in Mukachev on the Hungarian border, and hundreds of workers managed to flee to shelters just before two Russian missiles struck, according to local officials. So this is one of the first major known instances of Russia striking a facility which has clear ties to American interests, and this right here is a very big escalation by Russia. We are seeing right here in our first photo, there is the aftermath of that strike. You can see all the massive black smoke coming up from the side of this facility. Also, if you look to the right here, the entire right side of this building has been blown out. This building is truly destroyed, and it looks like it has been put through the ringer, and this was the site of an American electronics manufacturing plant that has been struck and destroyed by the Russian Federation in a very bold move, a very escalatory move as well. And we also have a video here showing the initial moments of the strike, and let's take a look at that first video. And as you can see right here, there is the initial moments of the strike. All the smoke right here in the air, and you really can't see the bottom of the screen as the Ukrainians blurred that out for OPSEC reasons, but you can see there is the edge of the fire right there on that plant, and here's all the smoke coming up from it. So quite a severe strike. This was literally right after they struck it, this video was taken, and that is a very, very big move by the Russians indeed. Very escalatory like I mentioned, but we've gotten some more information about this strike right here in our next post, which goes to Jennifer Griffin, and apparently according to initial assessments, and also just based on common sense, the Russian cruise missiles, which were multiple cruise missiles that hit this American factory, apparently were clearly targeting the factory on purpose intentionally and not merely by accident. This was no accident whatsoever, and Russia undertook this for the sole purpose of striking this American facility. So quite serious indeed, and that was a statement here from the initial reports, and like I said, very disturbing indeed. But moving on to our next one here, we got some more information from Null Reports, and apparently Zelensky made a statement about these strikes and gave even more information about what the facility was and how it was struck by the Russians. And we can see right here in Zelensky's statement, he said they used multiple cruise missiles against an American factory producing everyday appliances like coffee machines, and that's a target for Russia too, which is very telling. And also we do learn that the attack injured at least 15 people and set the plant ablaze after it was reportedly hit by two Caliber cruise missiles. So very serious once again, and also we do have some more photos here. Right here you can see there are the Ukrainian officials showing up to the plant to actually document the strike, and there's even more damage you can see right here in this post. So a extremely bad strike once again, very intentional as well. And also here's more smoke coming up from it from the neighboring town. And also in our last picture here, you can see just how large this truly was. This is a zoomed out view showing how massive the smoke plume was, and this was some severe damage. That facility is truly destroyed by all means and measures. So that is a statement from Zelensky, and also, like we said, a massive escalation. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to Yaroslav once again. And predictably, the United States is not happy about the strike whatsoever, and it's got the US officials very angry, very livid today, and they're making some wild statements toward the Russian Federation about this strike and the overall situation diplomatically with Vladimir Putin. So we do see here that apparently the US president specifically is very upset with Putin after he bombed an American electronics plant that we just saw, and also now it appears that Putin is refusing to meet Zelensky as well. So let's take a look at the president's post and see exactly what he said. And the US president said, "It is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense, but it's not allowed to play offense, and there's no chance of winning in that scenario, and it's like that with Ukraine and Russia." And he also made a political statement, and he said, "How did that work out? Not letting Ukraine fight back, but only defend, and regardless, this is a war that would have never happened if he were president. Zero chance. Interesting times ahead," according to the president. So, putting all the political statements aside here, there is some major messages in this post from the US president, which are very interesting. right here, the president is suggesting that Ukraine has to attack Russia in order to win the war, and he didn't say that he was disapproving of that. He said interesting times ahead. So it sounds to me like the U.S. president is suggesting that Ukraine should go on the offensive against Russia, strike Russian territory to force them into a peace deal, and this could be a huge policy shift by the U.S. president to change things dramatically between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, and this appears to have the blessing of the United States officials. So it looks like, based on this post right here, that the U.S. president is about to have a major shift in policy where Ukraine ends up going on the offensive against Russia. So we'll have to wait and see if this holds up or not, but that is an interesting sign and an interesting signal coming from the U.S. president. But moving on to our next post here, this one goes to News. And we can see right here that not only is the U.S. president mad about the electronics plant getting hit, but also he is very frustrated with the diplomatic situation between him and Vladimir Putin, because Putin is basically back to stalling once again. And we see here in the post that the U.S. president intends to leave Russia and Ukraine to organize their own meeting between the leaders without directly playing a role for now, according to administration officials familiar with the situation. So what this basically means is the U.S. is beginning the process of withdrawing from peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. This is basically what that means in translation, and this is the beginning of the end, in my opinion, when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine peace talks. And we'll find out later exactly what the new demands are by Lavrov and the Russian officials that also led to this decision right here being made today. So it's not going good. I'll go ahead and give you a spoiler alert. Lavrov is already backtracking on many statements that Putin made at the Alaska meeting. So we'll get into that later, but for now, it looks like the process has begun of withdrawing from peace talks. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Open Source Intel. Also, by the way, just a quick update about the Poland situation, because if you recall, yesterday, Poland had a Russian drone crash about 100 kilometers into their territory. It was not shot down by Polish defenses, and it crashed and exploded on Polish territory. So the response is Poland has lodged a formal protest with the Russian embassy in Warsaw after a Russian drone hit Osony yesterday. So this is the response. It's not a unified NATO response, but it's going to be a sole response by Poland lodging a formal protest with the Russians. And so far, Russia's not made any statements about this drone going off course, so I think that pretty much speaks for itself. But we can see here somewhat of a mild response by the Polish when it comes to this incident. But moving on to our next post, this one goes to War Translated. And also, while all the other stuff's been happening diplomatically with the electronics plant, etc., we have learned that Ukraine's been absolutely hammering the Russians in Crimea today in a very large attack. We've learned that the Special Operations Forces of Ukraine struck another fuel train of the Russian occupiers in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea, and we see here in this post it's apparently a very, very large attack yet again. We've heard that apparently they struck a rolling stock, which means a train of the Russians carrying fuel and lubricants, so it's yet another fuel train that was struck according to the post we have right now, and that was conducted by the special forces of the Ukrainian army. So a very big win once again, and believe it or not, we actually have a video showing that train on fire and showing the strike, which is pretty incredible to see. So let's take a look at the fuel train getting hit in Crimea right here on video. Oh, and look at that. That's not good for the Russians. Also, big explosion right there, by the way. This thing right here is truly burning to the ground. As you can see right there, it looks like all the fuel cars are going up in smoke. You can see it right there. They're all going up in fire. And of course, this is the second one that's been struck in just a few days. So Ukraine is starting to strike all these fuel trains going through Crimea and also going through mainland Russia. And it's becoming a bit of a crisis for the Russians because they're already experiencing a gas shortage. And this is yet something they cannot afford right here. This is carrying that gas, which they desperately need. And it looks like they are getting struck left and right by the Ukrainians, so not good for the Russians. But moving on to our next post here, this one goes to Max 25. We've also seen that at the same time that train was struck, there's also a railway station in Crimea in Dzhankoy that was also struck as well, and we have that video as well, so let's take a look. And look at that. It looks like a train station on fire right there. And also there appears to be a train leaving as well right here. So there is a train station on fire down the way there. You can kind of see it in the video. There's some smoke down there from it. But it was a big strike on the train station. Sadly, this is the closest video we have of it. So there's nothing really closer to show. But there was a confirmed hit in Dzhankoy on that railway station that we did see right there. I guess call the Russians hell rider at this point because they are riding out like hell right now. But anyways, jumping into our next post here, this one also goes to Max 25. We've also seen another view of the strike in Dzhankoy in Crimea, so let's take a look at this one as well. So we can see right here, there are multiple impacts here in Crimea. It looks like literally right on the sides of the road right here, and they've started multiple different fires. And we see this is the version of the Crimean Russian tours. They're going around showing you the fire damage here, and this is what they have to do in their spare time inside of Russia right now, is to show you all this fire damage and to show you basically wildfire starting. So we see that right here on camera. Dzhankoy is a bit of a mess this morning as a result of the strikes by Ukraine. And believe it or not, the Russian fire department was actually out there this time. I can't believe that, but they're actually out there trying to put it out, which is a rare sighting. But we do see that there in that video. But moving on to our next post, this one goes to War Translated yet again. And if you thought Ukraine was done with the Crimean attacks, you are very, very much mistaken. We also heard very loud blasts in Sevastopol near Cape Violent, and explosions rang out last night in occupied Crimea, in Sevastopol, and obviously the other areas which we've already seen. So let's take a look at the Sevastopol attack, and then you'll learn after this post exactly what was struck here, because it turns out Ukraine made a very big catch with this strike that we're about to watch. So let's take a look. And you can see right there, the Russian ran for cover, and I'll tell you what, that thing really did blow up. I think they're right. I'm not sure about their colorful language they used there, but they definitely blew it up right there, and that was a massive hit in Sevastopol that was being seen from an apartment window by a Russian, and we can see right there, a very large hit. So the big question is, people are going to say, what was hit? Well, like, what was that was actually getting smashed right there by that Ukrainian missile? So we learned here in our next post exactly what that was, and this one goes to Null Reports. The two powerful explosions which we just saw rocked occupied Sevastopol, apparently at the Pivdeny airfield at Cape Kherson's, likely hitting a Russian Black Sea Fleet military site, and fires broke out at the scene, and it was confirmed by NASA firm's data. So we can see right here, there are the fires, and that seems to correlate with the video that we just saw in Sevastopol. So it looks like it was an airfield that was struck, which is related to the Russian Black Sea Fleet, or literally right next to it. And also we can see here, there's another view of this airfield at the end of the runway, and also we do have, I believe, one more image here showing the strike. There is a strike actually from a different angle right there, and that proves that apparently it was the airfield that got struck. And we have one more picture right here as well, showing multiple different points of impact. So it looks like it was the Black Sea Fleet that was the target of this strike right here that we're seeing on camera. But moving away from that news and onto our next post here, this one goes to Null Reports yet again, and we've learned some big diplomatic news that India and Russia are having today. And to make it crystal clear, according to Null Reports, India is apparently siding with Putin, and it appears to be that is the case, and they're intensifying diplomatic ties and also seeking to boost trade as well. And today, India's foreign minister met Putin in Moscow. So obviously, it looks like those two countries are starting to get closer together, and we can only assume that has likely been exacerbated by the recent U.S. tariffs on India to force them to stop buying Russian oil. It looks like it's had the opposite effect, and it's actually pushed Russia and India closer together, which is not a good thing. And also, by the way, just to re-mention this one more time, Russia is experiencing a very bad gas shortage right now, and India is where they're trying to sell their crude oil to, and I think Russia might be planning to have India sell that back to them at a cheap rate, so that way Russia can keep their fuel supplies topped up and also not run out of fuel. Because if that happens and Russia runs out of fuel, they're going to be in a bad situation militarily and also from a humanitarian sense as well. So let's take a look here at the video and see the Indian foreign minister meeting with Vladimir Putin. And we'll keep this one short because there's not much to see here, but there is Putin right there. Maybe the real Putin, maybe a body double, not sure, but there's the Indian foreign minister meeting with him right there, and there's good old Horseface over there on the left. The horse is always somewhere nearby. He's always going to be lurking in the background somewhere, and there he is. But as you can see, he is now sitting down. He's going to be meeting with Putin and all the officials here, and we don't know exactly what they're discussing, but like I said, my speculation is they're discussing trying to resolve the fuel crisis in Russia. That is my speculation, and also they're strengthening ties, which is not a good sign when it comes to where India stands on the world stage. But that is what we saw there in that meeting. But moving on to our next post, this one goes to Euromaidan Press. And also, speaking of Russia's fuel shortages, we are seeing today that the General Staff of Ukraine has confirmed a strike on the Rostov refinery, which we did see last night, and also reports of 2 more hits on a Donetsk drone hub and also a Voronezh fuel base. So it looks like we are seeing here more attacks on fuel infrastructure inside of Russia, which is something that Russia can't afford right now because, like I mentioned, they're having a massive fuel shortage and it's expanding rapidly. So it looks like Ukraine is taking advantage of that and striking yet more fuel resources inside of Russia, and we have proof of that right here. So let's take a look. So you can see right there, there is the Russian fuel infrastructure going up in smoke right before our eyes right there, and you can see it's clearly burning all their fuel. I'm sure that makes the Russians really weep with fear and also anguish right there, because that is some very, very valuable resources going up in smoke that the Ukrainians are systematically hitting one by one. So Ukraine is not dumb here. They are doing exactly what they need to do, which is striking the fuel. So we did see that there in that video. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Osen Intuit, and we've also seen yet even more trouble today, and we did report this last night on the stream, but the Novoshatinsk petroleum petroleum plant was struck last night. We saw those videos on stream, and today we've learned that apparently it is still on fire, burning very badly. And we can see right here on the picture, there it is right there, still burning even into the morning hours, and Russia has not been able to put it out. We can also see here, according to NASA firm's data, there is a massive signature of a fire going on in that plant, and that is one of the largest NASA firm signatures I've seen in a very long time, and it looks like that fire spread rapidly and the Russians did not successfully put it out. So that was from NASA. And also we see here apparently more hotspots around the plant, not just on the facility itself, but also spreading to the nearby fields. So the Russians do not have that under control. And I will repeat this one more time. This is the way that Ukraine will win the war, through this secondary means and secondary attacks. This is how they truly win. The battlefield is a tough situation, but the one thing that's not tough is striking these facilities, because they don't have any air defense around them, and it's an easy, quick way to cripple the Russian economy, and Ukraine is wisely going right back to that strategy while they still have their chance. But moving on to our next one, this one goes to OSINT Technical, and we also have a video of the Novoshatinsk oil refinery still burning this morning. So we actually have video evidence of it as well, and let's take a look at it. And there it is, that massive NASA firm signature we just saw a moment ago. This is the result of it on video right here, and as you can see, the fire is truly massive. That facility is probably going to be either out of action or at least partially destroyed based on what we're seeing here in the video. So the aftermath is quite bad. We did get to see the initial impacts last night, but we didn't see exactly how large the impact was. But we do see here, there is the aftermath, which is quite severe once again. So that is one of the largest suppliers of the Russian military fuel right there at that plant, and it looks like it has been knocked out, so a very big loss for Russia. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to Status 6 Military and Conflict News. And moving away from our news about the major attacks by Ukraine on Russian oil infrastructure, we are moving back to our diplomatic news, because Lavrov today has issued some very, very bad statements about the situation and status of the peace talks being brokered by the United States between Ukraine and Russia. And we've heard today basically the smoking gun. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has stated that Russia supports the principles of security guarantees agreed upon in Istanbul in 2022, and everything else is a futile undertaking. So that is basically saying right there that Russia is not willing to bend on their position whatsoever, and that they want to make sure they have leverage over Ukraine, and they don't truly want to negotiate peace. That is basically what that means. And also Russia wants to have veto power over security guarantees, which basically gives them the right to reinvade Ukraine whenever they want. So that is not the way to negotiate. That is the way to end talks, and that is part of the reason why we've seen the U.S. president begin the process of withdrawing from peace talks, at least partially, as of today. So not a good sign. But we also learned that the statements got even worse from Lavrov in our next post, which goes to Preston Stewart. And very predictably, we can see that Russia continues to walk back or further complicate any progress that was seemingly made last week in the Alaska meeting, which was honestly very predictable. And here's a few comments below from Lavrov in addition to his last statement. He said, in the event of signing agreements with Ukraine, it will be necessary to resolve the issue of the legitimacy of the signatory from Kyiv, which tells us that Russia is still challenging the fact that Zelensky is truly in charge of his country. So they are still on that. They have not backed off of it. They're still saying that Zelensky is an illegitimate leader and that they won't sign anything with Zelensky being the signatory on the other end. So that pretty much makes any type of peace impossible, because Zelensky is the president of Ukraine, and without him signing it, nothing is going to be valid. So that pretty much ends it on its face, in my opinion. But also, they say Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky only after all necessary issues have been worked out on the highest level. So that right there is also messing up the whole plan. The U.S. president wanted Zelensky and Putin to meet first to get the talks started, and Putin won't even do that, even though he previously agreed to meet Zelensky at the Alaska meeting and also on the phone with the European leaders. Putin has backed out of that completely, according to what we're hearing today. So once again, it was stalling, and that is proof of it, in my opinion, right there. But guess what, folks? It gets even worse than that. That is not the end of it right there. It gets worse. Going on to our next post here, this one goes to World Source News 24/7. We've also heard reports that Putin has doubled down on his ultimatum to Ukraine to surrender the Donbass, the entire region, also abandon NATO aspirations, and to prohibit Western military presence on its territory. So what the hell? Like, that is just completely reversing everything that we've seen so far. And Putin was making it seem, and of course we knew it was lies the entire time, Putin was making it seem like he was willing to compromise, but that's not a compromise. That is capitulation by its definition right here in this ultimatum. So Putin is not serious. That's pretty obvious at this point. And for all the people that were holding out hope for the peace talks, I think today, the door is has been closed on that, at least from what we're seeing right now from Vladimir Putin. So not a good sign. But moving on to our next post, this one goes to Max25. Also, by the way, we have heard that allegedly the White House has ridiculed Lavrov's suggestion that Russia should become a security guarantor for Ukraine, according to recent administration officials. So that is also interesting. The White House is not just simply buying into that hook, line, and sinker. And also to explain this, Lavrov has suggested that Russia become a security guarantor for Ukraine along with China, and obviously those are adversarial nations to the West. So how can they guarantee the security for something that they literally are helping to invade? That's impossible, and that's a complete joke. So that just shows they're not serious, in my opinion. It shows more proof of that. I'm not sure how much more proof we can have at this point that Putin is playing games. It's literally clear as a bell at this point, and I'm not really sure exactly what this is going to lead to, because the U.S. is getting frustrated. The U.S. is getting very angry with this, and at some point, the U.S. president, no matter how hard he wants a peace, he's got to end this thing at some point, because it can't just go on indefinitely, and he's being backed into a corner by Putin yet again. But jumping into our next post, this one goes to Null Reports. And also, speaking of striking deep into Russia, as the U.S. president suggested basically in his post earlier, we do see here that footage has surfaced from the production line of Ukraine's Flamingo cruise missile, which is Kyiv's new 3,000-kilometer range strike weapon, which is now entering mass manufacturing. So that is the one thing that Russia was saying. They were saying, oh, maybe this missile won't be mass manufactured quick enough, but it looks like, based on the video evidence we have right here, that it is actually being manufactured a lot quicker than previously expected. So let's take a look and show some of the pictures of this process in action. So we can see right here in our first image, there is some right there on the mount right there being assembled in the Ukrainian factory. And jumping ahead here, here's another angle of it showing you this large jet engine propulsion device on the top of the missile. And jumping forward a little bit more, you can see there are several of them being manufactured. And this shows you and also proves they are indeed in mass production, according to the Ukrainians, and also by our visual evidence that we have right here as well. So this is quite impressive. It looks like if Ukraine can manufacture enough of these, they can rain hell down on the Russians if they choose to do so. So this could change the face of the war. This is truly a game-changing weapon, and also it's coming at a very crucial time as well, right as Putin is playing games and about to sabotage the entire peace talks. And by the way, the Russians are absolutely panicking about this. I did not include the Telegram post in today's video just for brevity's sake, but the Russians are panicking. They're also on their state media making a whole big scene about this whole thing, and honestly, it's warranted because this is a huge change for Ukraine and also a brand new game-changing weapon that they have in their arsenal at this point. So that is the big news from that. But that is actually our last post of the video. So before you go, folks, smack the like button and also subscribe to the channel as well for more daily short war updates just like this one. And thank you all for watching the entire video, by the way. We appreciate all the kind comments. And if you want to let us know you watched to this point in the video, go down below and type Flamingo down there in the comments and let us know you watched. And of course, the Flamingo, that's going to be a big game-changing weapon right there. And I'm sure it'll be fielded here very, very soon for a confirmed fact. So with that, folks, be sure to join us tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on our next nightly war news stream. And also, if you want to support the channel financially, you can do so on our Patreon page, and the link is in the description below for Patreon, where you can go over there and support the channel financially. And even a $5 a month membership, that's a huge help to the channel as well, and it's the viewer support that keeps the whole thing going, and it funds our whole operation. So we appreciate every single one of you very much for that. And of course, we will see you all tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, and with that, bye-bye for now.